Hi, welcome to the fourth consecutive episode of Batta Fast, where we will be uh, talking about how Pakistani played really well against India, which हमारे कुछ fans, I wouldn't even call them fans, इससे काफी खफा हैं, but sorry, bro, what can we do? I'm Amir Naqvi. With me, as always, this is Usman Samiuddin, who has a new mic.
Look at that. I have a new mic. I also have some headphones which I can't work out how to use yet, but I will at some point soon so I can look as cool as you. Can I publicly thank my cousin Farah who has got this for us from her company? It's very sweet of her. I told her I do a podcast and she's like, "Hey, I've got something for you." And she came up with these things and it's absolutely amazing. I love it. It makes me look way more professional than I am.
Anyways, today the episode is actually on Mohammad Amir, and Mohammad Amir's post-fixing return spell against India in the Champions Trophy final in 2017. Usman, why have we chosen this spell?
Because and I think I've said this on repeat, we should just record it from the first episode because it's against India, it's in the final, there's no bigger game. This is why we have picked this. No, of course, all those reasons do apply as they always have done. So I think barring like the last two T20 World Cups, probably the biggest ODI game Pakistan has played in like years, right? ODI final
Yeah,
of a major
yeah,
tournament against India, against whom they have an atrocious record, we all know, at ICC events. And that India side, like 2017 में कोहली और रोहित शर्मा और शिखर धवन सब यानी एक किस्म के सब फिरौन थे इस फॉर्मेट के और गेम के and stuff. And so and Pakistan, of course, hilariously had just barely qualified for the Champions Trophy. Yani unki, I think they had to, if I remember correctly, they had to schedule a series against a really weak West Indies side before the tournament so that they could win that and push their ranking up enough to qualify automatically for the Champions Trophy because
yeah,
सिर्फ 8
yeah.
टीम थी उसमें तो बहुत ही बकवास टीम थी बहुत ही फारिग टीम थी पाकिस्तान की ओडीआई की और फिर फाइनल एक तो और इंडिया से हारे भी थे पहली जो ग्रुप गेम थी तो वो जो नैरेटिव उसकी एक ड्राइव है उस टूर्नामेंट की और वो जो फिर जो जीत हुई फाइनल में दैट आई थिंक इज कंपेलिंग इनफ for that spell to be there. And of course, we will this time. Some of our listeners keep complaining कि यार तुम लोग स्पेल के बारे में प्रॉमिस करते हो कि बात करोगे और कभी करते नहीं हो फिर बहुत सारी ऐसी ऐसी चीजें के बारे में आप बात करते हो तो we will talk a little bit about that spell like shortly.
I have a great story about that first match that Pakistan lost in that tournament. And I've waited to tell this story because I think earlier it might have felt like hey, who the fuck do you think you guys are मगर अब क्योंकि ये सारे काफ़ी important positions में हैं तो it makes sense. So when Pakistan loses to India and loses terribly और उस वक्त मतलब एक अंदाज़ा हो गया था जो
Hi
पिछले
Siggy.
I guess maybe शायद Siggy's guest appearance कि 2011 में जब हम इंडिया से हारे हैं उससे लेके 2017 तक जिस दौरान पाकिस्तान एग्जाइल में भी था तो उस टाइम पे we weren't just losing to India, we didn't even feel like we were playing the same sport. जब हम 2015 के वर्ल्ड कप में उनसे हारे मिसाल के तौर पे like they scored 300, I think Kohli had a century and then Pakistan was just terrible. और तो फिर ये मैच भी जब हम आ रहे हैं तो उस वक्त शुएब नवीद उर्फ सिली टिडी अपने एक आइकॉनिक समनाबाद में एक मैंशन में रहते थे और वहाँ पे we had this like kind of emergency meeting where it was me, Shoaib, who's in the board. I'm not sure if Imran was there, but I think Imran at this point was doing his masters, so he wasn't there, I think. And then Hassan and Rehan, who were at that point, had won one PSL, and we were like, dude, we need to do something to save Pakistan cricket and what is going on ये वो और हमने स्टीडी की छत पे बैठ के एक पूरा प्लान बनाया और हमने कहा देखो पिचेस में मसला है तो हम पिचेस पे स्टोरी करेंगे पिचेस और बॉल्स पे रेहान और हसन इवेंचुअली डिड राइट फॉर डॉन ऑन इट एंड हमने कहा ये करना चाहिए वो करना चाहिए एंड देन there is history also of this group previously also trying to make moves to convince some people to join PCB and save Pakistan cricket और तो इस मैच के बाद भी हमने ये पूरा एजेंडा बनाया प्लान बनाया and we're like all right let's just meet 2 days later and from that moment on पाकिस्तान एक भी मैच नहीं हारा और फाइनल जीत गया और so it was like I feel this moment where Pakistan cricket was like, बेटा आप बैठ जाओ, मुझे हमें पता है हम क्या कर रहे हैं, हम 10 साल में एक दफ़ा कुछ जीत जाते हैं, आप अपने ग्रैंड प्लान्स अपने पास रखें. And credit to all those guys like Shoaib, Imran within the board, and Rehan and Hassan with the national setup right now. It's a crazy
Shoaib for
journey,
his
but back
no doubt
then,
for his exacting metric standards के देखो सेमीफाइनल तक भी पहुंचोगे ना तो ये
yeah,
कोई जीत नहीं है, ठीक है ना. एमी सिर्फ 12
yeah,
मुल्क का
yeah.
ये खेल है. सेमीफाइनल कोई काउंट नहीं होता है, ठीक है ना. आपको फाइनल जीतना है आपको.
So that was the thing. And then I think ये दो context हम पाकिस्तान की बात कर रहे हैं, but obviously the biggest context itself is that मोहम्मद आमिर खुद 5 साल के बैन के बाद, और इस पे हम आगे भी गुफ्तगू करते हैं कि ये वो मैच था जो, मतलब अगर आपने 2010 में आमिर गिरफ्तार और जेल होने के बाद आपने इतने साल वेट किया था फॉर दैट probably the most promising teenager out of like a endless list of teenagers in Pakistan cricket. He goes away, he comes back, and this was, in back then it felt like the return of the old Amir. In hindsight, you realize this was his peak as how Pakistani fans expected him to be. Because just अगर तू अब जिन लोगों को याद नहीं हो, like Amir, since coming back up until this match in this tournament, he'd barely picked up any wickets. He was injured for the semi-final. They brought him back in जब उसकी कमर में तब भी spasms थे. इससे पहले जो इसको वापस आए हुए 1.5 साल हो चुका था, and he had a terrible series in Australia, was useless in New Zealand. इसकी बॉल जो है स्विंग नहीं कर रही थी. पिछली एपिसोड में मैंने बात भी की थी कि पहले पीएसएल में आई रिमेंबर हम लोग नेट्स पे खड़े थे एंड आमिर गोज टू असीम अकरम एंड इट्स जस्ट लाइक कि मैं भी बॉल अंदर वापस नहीं आ रही है. और उस वक्त सबको यही था कि अच्छा हाँ इतने सालों से जंग पड़ गया है, आदत नहीं रही है, ये वो जल्दी वापस उसी लेवल पे आ जाएगी बात. और वो बात नहीं आई. और फिर इस मैच में खास तौर पे जो शुरू में 2 विकेटें लेता है आमिर, उस वक्त लग रहा था कि ब्रो वापस आ गया, बिकॉज Rohit goes with one that seems to come inside and Kohli goes with one that goes outside and you're like that's the magic we're waiting for. But अब अगर आप वो विकेटें वापस देखते हैं, और कल हम यही बात कर रहे थे कि there's actually none of that extravagant outrageous swing that you associate with Amir the teenager.
हाँ, इट्स रियली इंटरेस्टिंग. तो कल हमारी बात हुई, और हम लोग यही कह रहे थे कि यार इसकी बॉल, ये जो स्पेल था. इनफैक्ट आई थिंक आई रेज्ड आई काइंड ऑफ लुक बैक एंड आई थॉट maybe it wasn't as great a spell as we think it was. And now, so then after that I watched the spell, and then I watched a lot of his bowling in the run up to that tournament. And then I looked at myself and I said that I'm a class A che, like I'm an idiot of the highest order, because actually going through some of his older stuff, so like there's a wicket he takes of David Warner on that trip to Australia, जो हम लोग बात कर रहे थे 2016 की जो ट्रिप थी, जो बहुत ही historically bad tour Pakistan had. ODI में there's a wicket he takes of David Warner where the ball angles into David Warner, it's on his toes, like for him ready to like clip away, and it curves and it swings away and it hits middle. Next ball, Steve Smith comes to the crease. Next ball, Steve Smith comes to the crease. And Steve Smith had, at that time, he was doing that कि वो ऑफ स्टंप के कोई 6 फुट बाहर आके एक बॉल को पिक करके आपको स्क्वायर लेग पे मार देता था. वहाब रियाज को उसने मारा था एक अजीब क्रेजी शॉट एक जमाने में. तो he, Amir, smart enough, he bowls wide to him, like maybe on 5th stump. Steve Smith steps across, as he does always, thinking that the ball will come back in. But actually, Amir gets it to swing even further, and he dabs at it, and he gets caught by Rizwan behind the stumps. So, 2 and 2 balls, and it's Warner and Smith, and both like balls are swinging. Then, of course, there was the Asia Cup final, where
Yeah.
like if you watch that first over that he bowls to India, उसमें तो यार वो 6 बॉल पे 6 विकेट लेनी थी उसे, जिस तरह से वो बॉलिंग कर रहा था, स्विंग करा रहा था बॉल. So I felt really guilty for the conversation that we had yesterday when I was like, नहीं यार उस वक्त आमिर वैसे ही सीधी सीधी कर रहा था. He actually wasn't. He still had what we used to kind of remember Amir for from that 2010 wali summer. वो swing कर रहा था ball. And so watching that Champions Trophy final, there's not extravagant movement, but there is movement. The ball to Rohit, actually, when you get it that early in the first over, it's not like the movement of, say, Shaheen Afridi in the T20 World Cup final against Rohit, which anyway was a fuller ball. Amir goes slightly back, but he's committed Rohit to coming forward, and then it seems, I think it seems more than it swings, it seems back in, which is as dangerous. And it's not like it's the even the decision that was given, it marginally pitched in line with leg stump. आप ideal delivery left arm के अगर swing की देखते हो वसीम की या शाहीन की, तो it comfortably pitches in line with the stumps and it curves in. Sometimes it even pitches on off and it curves in. ये आमिर की जो बॉल थी with the angle, it just marginally made it onto the leg stump line and then jagged back. Great delivery nonetheless. And it would be still a delivery that like any left armer in the world would be like, yaar ye mujhe karna hai. So I feel bad for myself for even like thinking and saying कि नहीं यार वो थोड़ा सा मुझे लग रहा था कि आमिर का वो वाला आमिर नहीं था. He was still until 2017, until that 2017 final, I think there was still some glimmer of the old Amir in him until then.
सो आई थिंक अगर आप या तो 16 साल के हैं या एक पत्थर के नीचे रह रहे हैं एंड somehow decided to follow पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट राइट नाउ, जस्ट द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ इट, क्योंकि एक चीज़ जिस पे अक्सर खिलाड़ी सहाफ़ियों से खफा हो जाते हैं कि एंड इन ऑल स्पोर्ट्स कि जी आप लोग जो एक अपना एक नैरेटिव ले आते हो, आप अपनी एक स्टोरी ले आते हो और वो आप डालने की कोशिश कर रहे हो और ये सच्चाई नहीं है, ये वो राइट. And sometimes that's a correct observation and sometimes it isn't. और आमिर के केस में मैं यही बता like इस बात को I just want to lay it out क्योंकि Mohammad Amir comes in as a teenager to a country that is obsessed with fast bowlers anyways and has kind of phasing out Shoaib Akhtar at that point. And so there has been this running thing of like passing the baton from like one generation to the next, or Amir se yahi tawakkuat hain. Amir comes and plays. He plays a lot in again, him and Asif have this crazy thing where they played for a very short time. मगर उस वक्त आपके जो cricket Twitter जिन अकेले ममालिक में ब्राउन लोगों की अचीवमेंट्स को मानता है, सीना, साउथ अफ्रीका, इंग्लैंड, न्यूजीलैंड, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, these guys play a lot of cricket in that brief time over there. When Amir plays in England, the ball swings more than it has in like 20 years. तो यानी कि उस टाइम पे Amir plays in bowler friendly wickets. He takes a lot of wickets. He takes like absolutely video game kind of swinging deliveries in England in particular. Um, he bowls the first over in the World Cup final to the eventual man of the tournament, and it's a wicket maiden. So he's a big game player. He's a teenage sensation, and I think if you're a certain age of Pakistani fan, you have watched Michael Holding cry over Mohammad Amir like a million times. Um, and then obviously he gets ensnared in like the worst cricketing scandal of the century possibly. और उसके बाद वो उसकी जेल होती है, जेल से वापस आता है, अभी भी वो like he's still like in his early mid 20s. और फिर you know he's now battling against all those that जो narrative जिसकी हम बात कर रहे हैं, right? और उस तरीके में जो narrative था कि okay, return from like the prodigal son returns type of situation है, उसमें जो सबसे बड़ा ये मैच जो है, आई फील इट्स सच एन इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग क्योंकि आप अगर आमिर का करियर सिर्फ पोस्ट बैन उठा के देखें, ही इज़ अ वेरी डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ बॉलर. और आई थिंक यू हैड स्पोकन टू हिम, यू कैन टॉक अबाउट इन डिटेल अगर उसकी खुद की जो फ्रस्ट्रेशन है कि लोग मुझे से कुछ समझते कुछ और है, मैं हूँ कुछ और. बट अगर आपको वो अभी भी नैरेटिव में यकीन रखना था कि एक टीनेज सेंसेशन कम्स बैक आफ्टर डूइंग हिज टाइम एक्सेट्रा, तो ये मैच रियली लाइक इट डजंट रियली मैटर कि स्विंग 10 डिग्री की थी या 0 डिग्रीज की थी. यार सिगी चूतिए.
Thanks, Iggy.
Siggy is not an Amir fan. Um, बट क्या कहते हैं कि वो जितनी भी डिग्रीज उसने स्विंग की हो, द इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग वाज दैट इन अ फाइनल अगेंस्ट इंडिया वेयर ही वाज इंजर्ड, he takes Rohit Sharma जिसको कोई एशिया कप में he probably bowled better but got him the same way, he does the same thing there, and then I think we should dedicate like half an hour to the Virat Kohli dismissal. But like he gets Kohli out, he gets Dhawan out. It's really funny क्योंकि इस सीरीज में अभी तक हमने जो 4 एपिसोड्स किए हैं उसमें दो टेस्ट मैचेस किए हैं, बट एक हमने T20 किया जिसपे bunch of people were like bro T20 स्पेल क्या होती है.
How can,
और
yeah.
इस मैच में भी आमिर only bowled 6 overs. He's basically killed India off in those first 6 overs. और तो ये भी मतलब in the classical sense of a spell नहीं, और yet you know it's 6 consecutive overs of just clutch bowling in a final against an absolute juggernaut of a team, right? It's insane that India has not won every tournament. It has not won any tournament. It's insane that it's not won every tournament in
Sorry.
this last decade.
Yeah, so so the Rohit Sharma wicket, I think Rohit Sharma के पीछे लोग लगे रहते हैं कि यार he's got this weakness against left arm bowlers who are fast and swing the ball in at the start. Like that's almost literally any batsman and every batsman in the world. If you bowl, like if you're right-handed and the first over you're facing, this guy is going to bring the ball back into you, you're going to struggle. Bakal Bazid Khan ke, this is the worst time for a right-hander to face a lefty because swing kar raha hai, angle alag hai, you're going to struggle. So, he's come up against two very good in Shaheen and Amir too. So there's that wicket, which is great. But, the context is that at the time, I think, and what you say, I think absolute peak of that anchor heavy top three जो इंडिया की थी, it was an absolute peak, like Shikhar Dhawan, Rohit Sharma, and Virat Kohli. Like, in crazy form, they had butchered Pakistan in the first group game. The Kohli wicket is like the real deal in that whole thing, just for everything, for like execution of the wicket itself, for the drama of the occasion, for how it was called by Nasser Hussain. Like it has so much going for it. And the thing, that Nasser Hussain especially does so well, and we speak to Nasser Hussain about this, and it's there in a little while it'll come in, but he knows the game so well. So immediately when that first ball, when he's dropped by Azhar Ali at slip, or wo jo gaaliyan jo baki hai na Amir ne, those are as important as anything in that whole match. Jo gali bakta hai usse, and I'm not going to say it on air. I think Ahmer might say it, but I'm not going to say it on air. Jo gali bakta hai, jab usse drop karta hai, Nasir picks out exactly what Amir is trying to do. He's like fourth stump, just outside fourth stump. It's the line that Kohli has had trouble with in England. Like, so immediately Nasir has placed it in like its strict kind of technical context. कि इसी लाइन पे कोहली को इंग्लैंड ने मारा है पिछले साल, और इसी लाइन पे आमिर ने फौरन पिकअप करा कि यार ये एंगल है और ये लाइन है. And so when I was watching the Asia Cup spell, actually, the Asia Cup final, the Asia Cup game when, Pakistan were bowled out for 84 in the Asia Cup against India. And suddenly Amir had them 3 for 2 in the first over. And Afridi bowled him out. He bowled out those 4 overs. And he targeted Kohli outside off stump. He did not swing the ball back into Kohli in that innings. Kohli played him out. Kohli was good enough to play him out, but Amir was targeting that off stump line. He wanted to get him kind of reaching out, kind of driving out, poking outside off stump. वो around the wicket भी गया, over the wicket भी गया, but he did not go for that in-swinger which had gotten Rohit Sharma and Rahane in that Asia Cup game. Here, immediately, Amir went again for that fourth stump line. And, then you see, of all the people, Azhar Ali, Bechara, like his role in that tournament is actually like underappreciated because, it was his innings in the semi-finals that sealed Pakistan's chase. And then in the final, of course, he helped Pakistan get off to a flyer with like Fakhar Zaman, that partnership. So Azhar Bechara, उसकी कप्तानी से उसे हटाया था ODI की, उस बेचारा के very old role. And what most people remember of Azhar is typical of Azhar is that they remember that drop. Yeah. And आमिर जो गाली बकता है उसे, और उसके साथ अजहर के साथ if you remember बाबर आजम खड़ा हुआ है. And Babar Azam, like at that time, this is like, pre-Babar Azam superstardom era. Babar Azam must be thinking, I'm 100% sure Babar Azam must be thinking, God damn, I'm lucky that edge didn't come to me. He's like, because I don't want to be the guy this early in my career who drops Virat Kohli in a mammoth chase early on in the final of like a world event. I just don't want to do it.
I just also want to point out when Azhar has dropped Virat Kohli in his previous 5 innings versus Pakistan. He was in reverse order: 81 not out, 55 not out, 49, 107, 36 not out. मतलब, he was averaging something like 185 in white ball cricket versus Pakistan. When Azhar fucking Ali drops in, और अजहर अली पे थोड़ा सा अगर हम लोग थोड़ी देर के लिए ना, this is important because you've got this phase. You've got Amir, who is part of the notorious 2010 scandal, but that had been building up क्योंकि उस साल वो ऑस्ट्रेलिया गए थे and possibly, I mean, it's incredible that Australia is the most traumatizing tour Pakistan has had, and that they found a way to make it the most traumatizing in the 2010 tour, where Amir famously, this is actually, I'm going on so many tangents. This is a tangent within a tangent. Pakistani sahafi जो क्रिकेट के होते हैं ना, तो उन्हें मैच में क्या चल रहा है कभी कुछ नहीं पता होता, बट बाकी क्या चल रहा है वो सब पता होता है। कि मतलब जब मैं पहला मेरा पीएसएल था तो मैं हैरान था कि प्रेस बॉक्स में सीनियर सहाफ़ियों को ये पता था कि पीसीबी के किस ऑफिशियल ने किसको कितने दिरहम का पॉपकॉर्न का डिब्बा खरीद के दिया है और किस सेलिब्रिटी के साथ बैठे हैं। और उसी तरह मिर्ज़ा इकबाल ने खबर ब्रेक की थी कि आमिर ने पॉन्टिंग का कैच इसलिए ड्रॉप किया था क्योंकि वो किसी लड़की को ताड़ रहा था बाउंड्री पे। तो
माजिद भट्टी ने ब्रेक करी थी।
ये
माजिद भट्टी ने करी थी।
सॉरी, माय अपॉलजीज टू भट्टी
डोंट
साहब।
टेक अवे द क्रेडिट।
तो तो, तो पाकिस्तान मतलब ऐसी आपकी ये फिक्सिंग मनहूस टीम करते कराते इंग्लैंड में फट के तबाह हो जाती है। और उसके बाद आपका नया एरा आता है जो हमारे पॉडकास्ट और हमारी दोस्ती को बहुत कोइंसाइड करता है, वेयर मिसबा एंड अ बंच ऑफ clean and extremely boring players play for the next 5-6 years, which is also a really crazy time on Twitter. ये वो तो अजहर अली उस मतलब
या
अगर मतलब the part one of the Rocky one is the 2010 team, Rocky two, or in fact the better analogy would be the Wire. Wire season 2 is famously boring. Wire season 2 is basically Misbah's era, which Azhar Ali is the main character in. And then you get the post PSL team, and this Champions Trophy team is essentially, other than Sarfaraz, Babar, and Amir, I think everyone else is a PSL product, and to large way, even Babar was.
या या
And so in that moment you've got Amir, who represents that earliest era, and he's making his comeback. You've got the Champions Trophy team, which is like the wholesome era that Pakistan plays in. But you've got Azhar Ali, who now is completely incompatible with this talented wholesome side. But you also feel bad कि इन्होंने मुश्किल वक्त में हमें हमारी लाश उठा के दफनाई थी, तो we have to give him something back. And so in that moment you really wanted Azhar Ali to have transition into this new life, and this is what he fucking does. He drops
And
Virat Kohli first ball.
Azhar's debut was that 2010 tour, right? वही spot fixing की जो
Yes.
trade थी, वो अजहर बेचारे का डेब्यू था। और उसके बाद जब आमिर वापस आ रहा था क्रिकेट में, तो यू माइट रिमेंबर एक दो प्लेयर थे, हफीज ने ऑब्जेक्शन कहा था कि नहीं आप कैसे अलाउ कर सकते हैं, और अजहर अली भी बेचारे दूसरे एक प्लेयर थे जिन्होंने ऑब्जेक्ट करा था कि नहीं ये आप कैसे कर सकते हैं कि इतनी आसानी से प्लेयर्स वापस आ जाएं। और उसके ऊपर ये भी कि जब से आमिर वापस आया था, how many catches were dropped off his bowling in that time up to the Champions Trophy final? Like
So
17,
to like
18, 20
Amir,
catches.
so Amir truthers like myself, एक ये बड़ा बिलीफ था कि आमिर एक्चुअली वापस आ गया है, उसके बस कैच ड्रॉप हो रहे हैं इसलिए उसका कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं बढ़ रहा। एंड आई वाज रीडिंग, आई थिंक इस मैच से पहले इसके 12 या 16 कैचेस ड्रॉप हो चुके थे सिंस हिज रिटर्न, which is absolutely fucking crazy.
It's remarkable, but it's also a very Pakistani stat, right? It's also like a very
Extremely
Pakistani
Pakistani
stat कि
stat.
एक के ऊपर ना सिर्फ बैड लक है, बस उसके ऊपर बददुआ लग गई है कि यार इसी का कैच
Yeah.
ड्रॉप होगा। आप मोहम्मद समी के एक, although that's the worst example comparison, but मोहम्मद समी के आप amazing one handed catches diving at third slip ले रहे हैं, मगर आप आमिर के simple sitter जो आपके हाथ में आ रहे हैं ना वो छोड़ रहे हैं। So and you know the ball itself, let's talk a little bit about the ball. It's a perfect delivery, like for Kohli early on in innings, going across him, like not full, so you can't drive it. It's that perfect angle. लोग कहते हैं कि यार लेफ्ट आर्मर्स तो बोरिंग होते हैं। इयन चैपल की एक बहुत मशहूर पुरानी, खैर अब तो नहीं है, बट पुरानी सेइंग है कि लेफ्ट आर्मर्स unless they bring the ball back into you should be easy to play, because with that angle you should just leave every ball of theirs test match में, because आपके across जा रहा है, it's not hitting your stumps, So you just leave it. But of course, real life doesn't work like Chapeli thinks it does, right? So, you players now, especially, they want to feel the ball on the bat. They want to jab. And Kohli is like expert at this. Like Tremlett, James Anderson, Stuart Broad have traumatized him outside that fourth stump, saying, kilo, just touch this one. So Amir hits that perfectly. It's back of a length. You can't drive it. You can just jab at it, try to maybe dab it out into the covers, just get a feel of bat on ball. But of course, I think it just there's like a hint of like movement that takes it away from the middle of his bat onto the edge. And like, dude, yeah, ye catch. Come on, like let's go through the list of people in our minds who could drop that catch. I can't
Who
think
could
of
drop
anyone
that
other
catch?
than who could have dropped that catch. I don't know.
Who
Like
could? I
maybe
mean,
a comedy.
I can submit the latest census of Pakistan, and everyone, everyone in the country would drop that catch.
I'm thinking like a
Which
like an
catch are you talking? Are you
expression.
talking about the Azhar Ali catch or the
The
Shadab
other catch,
catch?
the other catch. Like
Oh, the Azhar
who can
catch.
drop
The
that
Azhar
catch?
catch.
Other catch. Like
I
who can
think
drop that
Siggy would
catch?
have taken that catch.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking like यार इतना यानी सिर्फ मैं सोच इमरान फरहत maybe if Karman Akmal was
Kamran
standing
Akmal.
at
Kamran Akmal.
slip, right? Like nobody else. And to get that, and I remember like I was watching the match. I was in Abu Dhabi at the time. I was watching the match with a couple of friends who were over. My wife, who is like, she's Indian, and she was like, ha 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 ha. And I don't get emotional in Pakistan games anymore. Like it's a job now. I just do not get emotional. But something about that run of Pakistan's to the final, something about the whole occasion, India, watching it, I jumped out of. We had used to have a kitchen in our flat which had like a these bar stools on the counter, and I jumped off it when Azhar dropped it, and I let out like proper gali. Oh nahi yaar. And my wife was like, "You never do this. Like, why are you doing this?" And I was like, "I don't know why I'm doing it, but I think there's some combination of Azhar Ali being so nice and Amir being so unlucky that he's just compelled me to jump out and swear really loudly with my daughter there, by the way, who was like 5 at the time."
I'm just gonna stop at this moment. We'll come back to this moment, but I think you just hinted at something about that Pakistan run. ठीक है, तो अभी हम बात कर रहे थे कि मतलब मेरा ज़ाती तौर पे ये हुआ था कि ओ पाकिस्तान को बचाना है और क्रिकेट की पीटीआई बनानी है और like हम इस मोड में चल रहे थे. And उसके बाद I talked about how Pakistan kept winning, but it's also the nature of it. So this is one of my favorite stories in the world. um, क्योंकि हुआ ये कि पहले तो पाकिस्तान आई थिंक साउथ अफ्रीका को हराता है दैट क्रेजी
Hmm.
हसन अली काइंड एक्सप्लोजन. Then
Yeah.
Pakistan is fucking losing to Sri Lanka, and who dropped Sarfaraz?
Uh,
Their all-rounder who dropped Sarfaraz.
the
Uh,
was
it
it
was like
Sara, who was a PSL legend.
maybe I think yeah, but it was it might have been a fellow Quetta gladiator who dropped that catch. I'll have to look it
Yes,
up,
and he's the
but
all-rounder that even
he
all Sri
dropped.
Lankans make fun of. Like AFF makes fun of him. Everyone makes fun of him as the guy.
So so that's how Pakistan gets there. And then उस वक्त ये भी हो रहा था कि एक एक थी कि जिसके भी साथ व्हाट्स हिज नेम याया हुसैनी की सेल्फी है वो टीम हार रही है मैच. And so people were then photoshopping Zainab Abbas and Yaya Hussaini with like other teams, and it was someone I know made a fake directive from the Sri Lankan cricket board saying none of our team is allowed to take a picture with Yaya Hussaini. Which a
Yes.
year later, Yaya Hussaini finds me at Gaddafi Stadium, and he's just like he's telling me this story कि ये आपको पता है मेरे ये निकला था बाहर, and I'm not sure if me and Yaya are on the same page or I am being accused or whatever. I just quietly sat and nod. So Pakistan is doing that, and it's wild because ek England will go on to win the World Cup, but already was being talked about as the
Mm.
most insane white ball
Yeah.
team ever. And the only team better than them was India, जो until Amir dismisses all three, I think इस tournament में तीनों out नहीं हुए थे, शिखर, रोहित और विराट.
Mm.
Like ये
Mm.
हर मैच 8 विकेटें 9 विकेटें 8 विकेटें,
हाँ,
मतलब I think they
एक दिन
five
का
or
नॉट
six
आउट जा रहा
hadn't
था. Yeah.
batted the whole tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. तो ये मतलब और फिर वही कि दबादब याया हुसैनी और जैनब अब्बास के फोटोशॉप्स बन रहे हैं और ये हो रहा है. एंड what was crazy is कि मैं कहने का मतलब ये है कि पाकिस्तान is cricket, it's like one of those greatest tournaments we've played because it's that whole script कि we are at this point of no return, अब हर मैच जीतना है, वो जीतने और सबसे आसान मैच भी हारने लगे हैं. और फिर पाकिस्तानी फैंडम अपने अल्लड़ चुतियापों पे लगी हुई है and is convinced that this is why the team is winning क्योंकि we're photoshopping Yaya Hussaini with other players. And it's true. We did. And so usme this is the run. It leads up to these two individuals, one who refused to play with the other, one who is extremely hardworking and nice and a wonderful human being that the whole country hates, and one who is a criminal who the whole country loves. और उसका कैच भी ड्रॉप हो जाता है. और ये विराट कोहली, मतलब विराट कोहली के arguably, particularly at that time, has been the most destructive batter against Pakistan
Yeah.
in an Indian shirt. He had a 183 chasing against us. He had scored 100 in the World Cup against us. He had that Asia Cup match you're talking about. It was Virat who guided it, scored more than half of India's run, guided them to. Matlab,
I don't know if I want to do a Hitler analogy here. It's like, you know,
I know.
if maybe I shouldn't do it, but it's like if you had a chance, if you had like one bullet and you had Hitler in front of you in like 1929 or 30 or something. You had one bullet, he's right in
And
front of
Azhar
you.
Ali
You know
misses.
that he's going to do this. You've seen the future. You know he's going to do this, and you miss. Right? This is that kind of moment, right? This is like, oh no, yeah. Like, you know, he's going to cause the deaths of like millions of people. He's going to be the worst dictator. He's going to be like a template for dictators forever to come, fascist, racist, white supremacist. You have one bullet. You know all this. You have one bullet. You're standing point blank in front of him, and you miss. You know, up to gaya kaam. This is that. Yeah, Virat
That
Kohli,
is that is
एकदम गए काम से. आई
and we'd already experienced this, right? कि एशिया कप में भी आमिर ने शुरू में उद्धम मचा दी थी और फिर विराट कोहली of all people leads them. And I think now it brings us to Nasir. हमने Nasir Hussain से Usman had a conversation with him about specifically the commentary he does, and I love this, and I think everyone can guess that a future episode on this podcast will be discussing Wasim Akram in the 92 final. One of the great similarities is that I think the two, my favorite two spells of commentary in a Pakistan match are Richie Beno in that final and Nasir Hussain here. And both times, because they take wicket, well, Wasim takes wickets on consecutive deliveries. Amir should have taken on consecutive deliveries. The commentary is reacting to the commentary in the previous ball, and so Amir in this as well. He's sitting with Nasir in this is sitting with Saurav Ganguly. They've dropped the catch, and then as Amir is running in, like Ganguly is like, and how crucial will that be, or how important will
how
that
much
be?
will that cost
So
them? How
when
much will that cost them?
yeah, how much will that cost him? And then so Nasir's reaction is not that much or nothing at all or something like that, right? I'm sorry for butchering it. But in that moment, like, and then he goes on to say that iconic line, that's Pakistan cricket for you, down 1 minute, next minute up. And I think commentary is such a difficult art because A, you can't be talking too much, and B, you have to be able to completely get something succinct in that moment live. And as a writer, I feel, you're just like, damn, that is extremely difficult to do. It becomes even more difficult because all commentators are ex players who have no training and usually no real skill set at crafting narrative. Um, what Nasir does in this is like a level of a novel or something. It is because it's instinctive, it's impulsive, and then when he said what is instinctive and impulsive, he says this one line that doesn't just capture that moment and that match and
Hmm.
that tournament, but really encapsulates like 70 years of, or at least the last 40 years of Pakistan cricket. And I think
Not just cricket, by the way.
myself
I
and
think it captures. I think it captures like a wider Pakistan history generally. I think that's the genius of what he does.
I I don't know about up kab hota hai Pakistan, so I don't want to debate the
या
wider history,
या ये के
but
जमाने
it's
में आता है,
definitely
ठीक है ना?
yeah, but it's definitely true for the cricket team, and I think there is such a huge sense of gratitude so many Pakistani fans felt for Nasir, because it's like, I think जब आपको किसी से मोहब्बत भी होती है, one of the biggest reasons you fall in love with someone is that they see you in the way you want to be seen, right? And Nasir sees Pakistan cricket the way it wants to be seen. I think that's true love. What did you speak to Nasir about?
So yeah, it was just this. It was asking him about, and we'll hear his responses shortly. But like, it was asking him about how he managed to. Nasser Hussain was never. If you think of the captains around him, Mike Atherton was the captain, and then he was captain, and Atherton was like an Oxford, Cambridge guy, very eloquent, very articulate, and writes beautifully. Nasser was never that. Nasser was much more kind of, not working class, but he was much more kind of, the rough and ready kind of guy, not known for his eloquence or articulation or whatever. And suddenly, he's produced the line that is going to go down forever now in Pakistan history as the line about Pakistan cricket. And so I spoke to him a little bit about like the improv nature of how it came up. And it's fascinating. Like, I think we shouldn't like waste time me talking
Yeah,
about
let's
it.
listen to it.
Actually listen to what he says, but it is a fascinating little like insight into Nasir's mind.
Okay, so I know we promised fascinating insights from Nasir, but unfortunately, he was super busy with the Ashes and everything. So the only time Usman could speak to him was when he was driving in his car. And the audio that got recorded is extremely difficult to listen to. You can just about make out what he's saying, which is why we decided to include it. However, if you find it's too difficult to continue listening to it, you just skip forward. It's about 8 minutes, and we resume our conversation. We really apologize. Wish we could have done differently, but it is what it is.
Nasir Hussain, thank you very much for joining us on Batta Fast. I'm sure you don't know what Batta Fast means, but we're talking about Mohammad Amir's spell, which you of course saw at the Champions Trophy final against India. Took 3 wickets, kind of blew apart that top order. I'm going to ask you straight out. Do you remember your commentary for the Amir wicket of Virat Kohli?
Obviously, because I did at the time, I do ever since, because Pakistan fans and social media absolutely loved it. I was actually a little bit worried about it, because one of the first rules of commentary is not to back reference something, so that future, young lads and lasses in the edit suite who are trying to cut that wicket won't have to go, I said something like, not that important, because Salhab had just said, Ganguly had just said, how important will that be?
Exactly.
I went, not that important, and a millisecond after, as Kohli was walking off, I thought to myself, that's going to be a real difficult edit for someone when that wicket's shown. Little did I know that actually Pakistan fans would love it, really. So, listen, the first thing I look at ICC events, when I'm asked to do ICC events, are India-Pakistan games. For obvious reasons, you don't see them outside ICC events. The global audience, the feel in the ground, the build-up, the days, great cricketers going against great cricketers. And, that moment, that day, sort of encapsulated Pakistan cricket, how it's always been, or as long as I can remember. You probably remember a bit more, but, 92 World Cup, they were out of it, then they're in it. That ICC Champions Trophy, they got hammered by India, Edgbaston, they were out of it, and then they beat England, one of the favourites, if not the favourite, and then that spell from Amir, Fuckers Demand 100, and the spell from Amir was breathtaking, and the ground was just erupting. Well, half the ground was anyway.
Is that something that, at that moment, because you're associated with a lot of great Pakistan commentary lines at various places. You were there at Shaheen's spell in Dubai when that's out, and then he was out with that first LBW. Like, is that something that just comes, is that pure instinct?
Yeah, well, that's my point, really. On days like that, Pakistan around the world, Pakistan fans in the ground. When he nicks it, when it's Kohli, and I think I said on commentary, and you look up and you see it's Kohli.
That's exactly it.
Exactly. Then Azhar Ali drops him, and he looks up, and he's dropped one of the greatest ever in run chasing, as we saw a few years later at Melbourne, in the T20 game. Kohli is the master of the run chase. Sharma, Kohli, and Shikhar Dhawan in that tournament were phenomenal. They were run machines. And you drop Kohli on a flat one at the Oval, and you must be thinking, that could cost us this whole tournament. And then the very next delivery. And it did. It did sum up Pakistan cricket. They are they are 1 minute down and the next minute up. And imagine being a Pakistan fan having to go through that day in, day out, every year of your life.
When was the first time?
So watchable.
When was the first time that you kind of realized how much that line resonated with Pakistani fans? Because you said at the time you were kind of a little bit worried, but do you remember when it first kind of hit you how big that line was?
Probably the '92 World Cup. Even that they were out of it, and Imran.
Oh no, sorry. I meant when did you? Sorry, I meant when did you realize the line that you had said, the 1 minute up, 1 minute down? When did you realize that line had become part of popular Pakistan cricket folklore?
I wasn't on. I don't know when Twitter started. I didn't do Twitter, social media, and then I quickly realised as a broadcasting tool, social media is very important. England naming their side yesterday. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Immediately, I can see who they've named or whatever. It's a very important tool as a broadcaster. But also, you suddenly quickly realise the good and bad of it. And I know 6 months later, you go on it, and Pakistan fans are re-quoting you. If you say anything, they love you get for a line. And then obviously what happens with Shaheen spell at the MCG, Pakistan fans suddenly think I'm some kind of lucky omen. And Indian fans vice versa. So I'm getting a lot of love from Pakistan and a lot of hate from India in very good spirited ways. So
there's
part of the thing of social media, I guess.
And there's one last thing. I remember this line. I don't know if you remember it, but there was this line that the last time Pakistan won a major event, that was the 2009 T20 World Cup, and I think it was a semi-final against South Africa. And Kamran Akmal hit this massive six straight down the ground off Dale Steyn, and you had prefaced that by saying sometimes you don't know which Pakistan are going to turn up, and then he hits that six, and then you're like, and it's the one to be very afraid of. Do you remember that line at all?
Yeah, I do, only because I literally, as you say it, you forget it. Like most of my lines, they're instantly forgettable, but somewhere down the line, and it shows the importance of commentary, I guess. In that people later on do pick up on it, and years later, people will, say thank you for that line. It sort of encapsulated everything that we thought at the time. We didn't know what Pakistan were going to turn up. We still don't know what Pakistan is going to turn up. But when they turn up and play like they did in the Champions Trophy or like at Melbourne, the Shaheen spell, or they are brilliant tournament. They are a brilliant tournament side. They really are. They can be awful one moment and brilliant the next. So these things are nice to hear, but you got to remember that you don't take yourself too seriously. It's actually the cricket and the cricketers and the game that is more important than any bit of commentary or whatever. And the joy and the suffering that India and Pakistan fans have gone through in equal measure sort of says why it's such a great game.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nasser, and hopefully we'll be hearing some lines from you when India and Pakistan next face off in Ahmedabad.
World Cup India. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks so much, Nasser. Thanks, man. Thanks so much for your
So that was Nasir Hussain on the commentary of the Amir spell. Um, what was the big takeaway for you, Usman, in like in how he's experienced and described his experience of that moment?
I think like what you said just before we went to that conversation, I think in how, this is how you want Pakistan cricket to be described, how Pakistan cricket sees itself, and it is seen through Nasser's words. I think he's got a real proper affection for Pakistan cricket. I think there's something in the nature of Pakistani cricket which, we've never been able to describe so succinctly, but I think there's something in the nature of the game which really tugs at some baser instinct in how he sees the game should be played. I think, for Nasser was like a great captain. He was a pragmatic captain. Above all, very aware of his limitations, very aware of the limitations of his side, but still had this real inner rage and passion in him always. Like, and that is what really kind of willed him on into the game. And I think he sees in Pakistan that passion, one, but he also sees the extravagant gifts that he never had, so he sees, and I think it appeals to something in him. Uski kai line hai isme maine aapne suna bhi hoga, maine baat kari thi wo Kamran Akmal wala, jo Kamran Akmal in the 2009 T20 World Cup, Nasir kehta hai ke, I wonder which Pakistan is turned up today, as Dale Steyn runs into bowl, and then Kamran Akmal deposits him straight down the ground for this massive six, and Nasir's like, yes, I think we know which one has turned up, the one you should be afraid of. It's, I think uske andar ek, and like the insight that he has into the game, like he's the first guy that I heard really innocuous moment. I don't know where it was. It must have been at a world event where Shoaib Malik stretched out to a spinner and just narrowly missed a stumping because he had this crazy stretch. Shoaib Malik was very flexible always. He had this crazy stretch by which he kept his back foot just inside the crease. And I was like, oh yeah, because we watch Shoaib Malik, we know this. Nasir picked up on it. He was like, yeah, Shoaib Malik, you see him do that quite often. Like he gets away with those because he is so elastic. And I was like, damn, he really watches the game. And then of course, he did that interview with Shadab Khan before the T20 World Cup final last year, which is the first time, like, hum log Shadab ke bare mein sunte rehte hain from, mashallah, Rehan and others who know him really well. But I've never seen Shadab speak eloquently in public about the game, about his love for the game, about what matches mean to him, articulately in Urdu, let alone English. And yet Nasser Hussain did an interview with him ahead of the T20 World Cup final, in which Shadab spoke beautifully about the game in English. And it was like, oh my God. So, Nasser is like this great broadcaster with this great love for Pakistani cricket, who really, I think, and players get that and they vibe off that. And I think they respond to that. So, for him to get like Shadab to speak so well about the game in that interview, I think it was testament, obviously, to Shadab, but as much testament to like what a great broadcaster and just appreciator and connoisseur of Pakistan cricket Nasir Hussain is.
100%. I think like you've hit the nail on the head. That Kamran Akmal example is probably an even more insightful comment in Pakistan cricket. And I think unlike a lot of other guys who've watched a lot of Pakistan cricket, he's also not kind of contemptuous of it, right? Because if you are from a more professional side, like Pakistan is always up to bullshit, and it's very easy to be very just sick of them, which is what the vibe you get with a lot of other commentators, understandably so. And so बट एक इसमें ये भी कहना चाहूंगा कि शायद इस मैच में भी जैसे आप कहते हैं ना कि यार ये बॉलिंग इतनी अच्छी नहीं थी, पिच आसान थी, समहाउ इस मैच में कमेंट्री शायद इतनी अच्छी नहीं हो, लेवल इतना हाई था क्योंकि आमिर की जो तीसरी विकेट है इज पॉसिबली रमीज राजा's greatest moment in the commentary box. Ramiz Raja, who has this amazing, like I think he really is a great example of cricket में colonialism का impact क्या होता है कि अभी भी अंग्रेजी में commentary होती रहती है, even though the vast majority of cricket fans don't speak English as a first language. और उसमें जो है जिसकी अच्छी अंग्रेजी होती है, खासतौर पे पाकिस्तान जैसे मुल्क में गिन चुन के ही कुछ खिलाड़ी हैं, players come from very modest backgrounds, have not been educated in English. So you've got Ramiz Raja, who's an H-Sonian, who can say, like, he barely is even describing what's happening on the pitch, but he gets gigs all the time. And I think there was a bunch, there's early days of Twitter, there's Ramiz porn, because Ramiz has a tendency to be very, very innuendo laden while talking.
Long
Then there
and
was the fact
crunchy
that
shot.
somebody Yeah, and then someone, I'm forever grateful to Wakas, who actually did the data on how when Ramiz Raja commentates, Pakistan lose a wicket. And then Ramiz Raja's disastrous spell as chairman, which again people think, oh, भाई ये तो इतना smart दिखता है, English अच्छी बोलता है, अच्छा ही काम किया होगा इसने. And clearly I don't agree with that. But in that moment, like Amir ball karata and it's a cross seam, and that cross seam causes it to bounce higher. And Shikhar Dhawan, who at that point was the counter punch, ठीक है भाई तुमने इन दोनों को आउट कर दिया, मुझे आउट करके दिखाओ, उसने चौके चौके मारना शुरू किए थे, and he gets surprised, gets the edge, and Ramiz Raja calls it immediate, like as Amir lets the ball go, not even when he's got the wicket, he goes cross save, and then he gets the wicket. And so you're just like, wow, man, even Rambo was on his A game in this match.
Risen
And so
to the
that leads
occasion.
me to a question that we discussed. We discussed that day on Paces Space Yard, हमारे WhatsApp group पे, where we had this discussion: was this an ideal match to watch, right? Because some of us were like, man, and I was in that group, I would have really liked it to go to the last ball of the last over and Pakistan wins a close match, you know. And Chima, I remember, was one of those who was arguing that, man, this was the perfect match because when we batted, everyone played to their full potential. Fakhar Zaman, Mohammad Hafiz
Hmm.
again plays an innings that probably people had waited for longer than they'd waited for Amir to come back. Like everyone knew Mohammad Hafiz as a middle order kind of finisher could be a match made in heaven. He was just, I think, maybe my favorite Hafiz innings ever in that match. Pakistan scored a huge run and then they absolutely destroy India. Other than Hardik Pandya hitting a few sixes, it was just absolute decimation. So I wanted to ask you, and in fact, people in the comments as well, please weigh in on this. What would you prefer? Would you prefer a close match? Would you prefer like how India beat us in the 2007 World T20 final? Or is this the type of match you enjoy more?
100% I would have preferred a close match. Like 100%. Like जो
Yeah.
एक क्लोज मैच का जो नशा है, जो उसका जो मजा होता है ना, वो आपको कहीं नहीं मिल सकता. इसमें तो देखो, इसमें एक सिंपल सा इमोशन, एक वक्त के बाद आपका एक सिंपल सा इमोशन आ गया था, जो कि था कि हम जीत रहे हैं. सो यूर एक्सिलरेटेड, यूर एक्सटैटिक, यूर हैप्पी थ्रू आउट. लाइक यू नो व्हेन इंडिया 3 डाउन, यू बेसिकली नो द गेम इज गॉन. हाँ ठीक है, हार्दिक पांड्या आके मारता है, थोड़ा सा आपको लगता है कि यार नहीं यार, यहां से तो नहीं.
धोनी
बट
धोनी जिंदा है अभी भी.
हाँ, धोनी भी है, वो यू नो द ओल्ड काइंड ऑफ मियादाद थिंग कि जब तक वो नहीं आउट होगा तो आपने मैच नहीं जीता है. तो बट ओवरऑल यू काइंड ऑफ सर्फिंग ऑन दिस लाइक एक्सिलरेशन कि हम लोग जीतने वाले हैं, हम लोग जीतने वाले हैं, हम लोग जीतने वाले हैं. हाँ, हम लोग जीत गए. बट आई थिंक जो आपको जो एंग्जाइटी, जो टेंशन, जो जो लाइक फीलिंग्स विच यू कांट काइंड ऑफ डिस्क्राइब, यू नो, लाइक अ क्लोज मैच, you get into whoever's playing. Abhi Ashes chal rahi hain, but you know, while we're recording this, the Ashes are on these days, and those kind of close matches, we have no skin in that game. Like, you know, they're covering it or whatever, we have no skin otherwise. But जो close matches चल रहे हैं, उसका एक अलग ही नशा होता है. तो I like, hands down, you ask me any day of the week, I would say I would have preferred for Pakistan to have made 275, and for Amir to have taken those 3 wickets, but for India to have fought back and then maybe like taken it down to the last ball and lost by like, I don't know, a run or won by a wicket, I would have preferred something like that. But can I also, you go on. I want to rewind after this. But you go on. No, because I want to rewind. So you finish this point and then I want to rewind.
I was just going to say that I was firmly in the same camp, but then I think जब अभी वर्ल्ड कप, फुटबॉल के वर्ल्ड कप का फाइनल था, possibly one of the most exciting matches in any sport I've ever seen. तो उस पे हमारे गयास भाई थे. I don't know if I've shared this story on the pod before as well, but anyways, I'm sorry if I'm repeating. Gayas bhai hamara, love Gayas bhai. He used to arrange for our meals every day, and I used to point out different places in Karachi to get to. I won Gayas bhai's respect for knowing really good places. So he was not into football. For the final, he's like, "Yo, let me come and watch with you guys." And I think Rehan posted a video of me during that final. I was extremely stressed out. और जब बेसिकली मैंने आधा फाइनल एक फ्रिज के पीछे से बैठ के देखा था. लाइक कमरे में फ्रिज था, मैं उसके पीछे छुपा हुआ साइड से ऐसे देख रहा था. जब मैच खत्म हुआ है तो एक तो गयास भाई ने मुझसे कहा कि पता है अमर भाई के जब पहले सुनते थे ना कि पाकिस्तान इंडिया से हारा और 3 लोग दिल के दौरे से मर गए ये वो, तो मुझे कभी यकीन नहीं आता था कि लोग कैसे मर सकते हैं मैच देखते हुए। आज मुझे था कि मैं एम्बुलेंस करीब रखूं कि पता नहीं कुछ भी हो सकता है आपके साथ, मुझे इतना डर लग रहा था। एंड ही वाज जेन्युइनली लाइक extremely
परेशान।
worried.
हाँ,
And I also was thinking कि like when it ended, I noticed tears, and their tears were not joy, they were just relief because my body had been so stressed for 2.5 hours. So I do wonder, like, oh my god, can you take that amount of stress and it would be more enjoyable than that? But I think the answer I would still give is that maybe yeah, man. But I feel इसमें context ये डालना चाहिए कि ये जब पाकिस्तान ने इंडिया को हराया है तो close or distant or whatever, like we had nothing to
हाँ,
like shout about, because एक तो हमने मैच खेलना ही उनसे छोड़ दिया था, और फिर हम खेलते थे सिर्फ बड़े टूर्नामेंट में, और बड़े टूर्नामेंट में वो हमें जलील करके हरा रहे थे।
वो बस
तो इट
एक
वाज
जीत थी, वो जो अफरीदी ने अश्विन को 2 छक्के मारे थे एशिया
एक
कप
आफरीदी
में।
अश्विन को कहा था, और फिर उससे पहले जुनैद खान की जो
हाँ,
एक
लेकिन वो
मजनून सी इनिंग्स
एशिया
थी,
कप
राइट?
का एक बायलैटरल था, इट वाज़न्ट अ ग्लोबल इवेंट।
Yeah, yeah. And I think the Asia Cup Indian team also wasn't like Bahubali level India team that the 2017 one was.
या या
Um, तो I think कि उस sense में भी कि आपने जैसे तैसे जीता for this fan base, for everything that gone through, for the fact that I think we'd given up on beating India. Simple as that. It was like कि खास तौर पे इसी टूर्नामेंट के पहले मैच के
हुँ।
बाद यही था कि ठीक है, अगर अभी से हम इंस्टीट्यूशनल चेंजेस लाएंगे तो शायद 25 साल में हम इंडिया को हरा सकें, ऐसे हालात होते थे। एंड देन टू कम बैक एंड टू डिफीट देम, आई थिंक 180 रन से, like,
हाँ।
yeah, I think Nasir was the right person for the job, man. Down 1 minute, next minute up.
I wanted to just rewind because I'm very conscious of those people who say कि आप spell के बारे में बात नहीं करते हैं. I just want to go back to actually the Kohli wicket, because we talked about the drop, but the wicket ball is something like I just want to give a couple of minutes to. And so the thing I feel about that ball, it's fuller, right? So it's not as back of length as the first ball, just पे edge होके drop हुआ है. This is fuller, and it's kind of angling across him, and it does a little bit, I think, off the pitch, a little bit, but I feel like he went fuller. Amir went fuller, and this is like the crux of the whole Amir thing. I think he went fuller कि यार BC अब बस और मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ, because he had been increasingly, and he would go on after the Champions Trophy to not be the guy who would bowl those full lengths, and we'll probably have a little bit of time to discuss this, but he was not bowling those full lengths. I think he went to that fuller length in pure frustration कि यार इस पे अगर नहीं विकेट लूंगा मैं तो अब बस मैं ये कर रहा हूं जो मैं पहले करता था. And he bowls it fuller, and he lures Kohli into an attacking stroke, and Kohli of course picks the wrong line to kind of flick across, and he closes the face too early. But I have a feeling that he went full out of frustration कि यार चलो फुल फेंक के देखते हैं कि क्या होना है इस बॉल के साथ, बिकॉज मैंने जो परफेक्ट बॉल कोहली को बोल करनी है वो मैं बोल कर चुका हूं, और उस पे बेचारे अजहर अली हमारे अपना कारनामा कर चुके हैं, तो अब मैं क्या करूं, मैं पागल हो रहा हूं. I'm just going to go back and I'm going to throw almost like a Hail Mary out there, like full ball. You don't want to be bowling full to Kohli. If you think about Kohli's game, you don't want to be bowling full to him a lot, right? Because he's so good at driving, he's so good at clipping you through mid-wicket. You don't want to be bowling. And so I think he went in pure frustration, and also in like this desperation to kind of grasp something of the old Amir. And of course, Kohli plays this, like, kind of closes the face a little bit too early. And then, we were talking about Shadab earlier, the interview with Nasir and the PSL generation. And if there is anyone else in all of Pakistan that you would rather have at point in a white ball game, then
In any game.
you're blind. Then you've been living under a rock, because I would not have anyone other than Shadab Khan. And we already knew that he was a gun fielder by that stage, because PSL mein wo kar chuka tha. And that's not an easy catch. Ganguly, although he identifies him as Fakhar Zaman initially in comms and says, sorry, Shadab, he recognizes that it's not an easy catch. Like, thoda sa aapko karna hai, and Shadab makes it look stupidly easy. But if you can think, उससे पहले जो वर्ल्ड टूर्नामेंट था 2016 का T20 वर्ल्ड कप था, जिसमें पाकिस्तान रीच देयर लोएस्ट फेज, उस टूर्नामेंट में famously Pakistan had Mohammad Irfan standing at one point in that tournament. And so to go from Mohammad Irfan at point to now having Shadab was Pakistan 1 minute down, next minute absolutely up. Like it rings home in so many ways.
It's amazing also क्योंकि वही अगर आपने आपको क्रिकेट पता है आप दो अमेरिकियों को ये दो बॉलें दिखाएं so even they can understand that when Azhar Ali drops it a child could have caught that and what Shadab catches is actually quite difficult because the ball
Yeah.
is screaming past him he gets both hands to it or
He gets both hands.
it's
That's it. That's exactly it. That he's athletic enough and nimble enough and quick enough to get both. Most Pakistani fielders would have stuck one hand out and fallen over. I can even imagine, like,
most Pakistani fielders would have already turned to collect the ball from the boundary, right? Like they
हाँ,
were like, "Oh, chokka, okay, let me go and get this."
कई हैं
I
कई हैं जो जिन्होंने डाइव मारी होगी, उनकी हैट गिर गई होगी, चश्मे गिर गए होंगे. You know who I'm talking about. डाइव बड़ी अच्छी लगी होगी, मगर उंगली से
Inzamamul
लग के
Haq would
चौके
have
से लगे
broken
होगा.
his pinky finger, like Inzi गिरता और फिर वो अपनी उंगली पकड़ के भागता हुआ जा रहा होता कि जी उनकी उंगली टूट गई है.
So
I
many,
mean,
so many.
that's the I think like where the script writer for Pakistan cricket is just total Ekta Kapoor, कि मतलब आपने
Shadab Khan.
the yeah the characters you're choosing. I think Shadab. I just a tiny segue on him as well because I feel out of all you guys, like I was far more peripheral in cricket, and so Shadab, I have like a really sweet story with. Okay, I was PSL two just a few months, like 4 months before this tournament. I was working for Islamabad United, and the first day we have a practice game. Hassan Rehan and I are standing watching Islamabad's two squad play each other, and Wasim Akram walks in. And he's like, ये तुम लोग ने बड़ा अच्छा लड़का पकड़ा है, ये जो अभी बैटिंग कर रहा है, and it's Shadab. And
Oh.
Shadab, has a good all-round performance. It's a practice match, right? So, as the social media guy, he's I don't know, someone names him player of the match, so I just go and take a picture of him. I remember in that moment, like he was like I don't know if any non-family member was taking the as आप player of the match was for तस्वीरें उसकी खींच रही हैं कुछ. He had no airs. He was really sweet. He remains sweet even to this day, but he's a very very nice person. But in that moment he was a literal boy from small town Pakistan in this big moment, and he's kind of has his first moment. And it was wild to me that just 4 months later this guy that I had seen being so bashful and shy, वो 4 महीने बाद वो Yuvraj, he's insisting on the replay that gets Yuvraj out.
Uh,
He has completely like the amazing thing about this squad, and because they were all youngsters, was their sense of occasion. Like this was something that the previous maybe 10, 15 years mein aapko lagta tha कि a lot of times Pakistan had already lost the match, particularly against India, before they even stepped onto the field. And then you had these guys who had none of those scars, and they also just show up and really take in. And I mean, they had been thrashed by India already themselves in this tournament, and several of them had faced thrashings in the past. But the way this team comes out is crazy, and I think that's where I want to bring it back to Amir. For all his other issues, Amir is just such a big game player, राइट लाइक कि मैं T20 वर्ल्ड कप फाइनल की बात कर रहा था, हमने एशिया कप फाइनल की बात की और अब ये चैंपियंस ट्रॉफी फाइनल की है. और अगर आप इन मैचेस को निकाल के खास तौर पे ये जो एशिया और सीटी फाइनल्स को निकाल दें, आमिर्स बॉलिंग इज not at all exciting and not at all destructive, and his average is going in crazy numbers because उसको विकेट ही नहीं मिल रही है, तो अब वो रन भी कम देने की कोशिश में वो पीछे बॉल करा रहा है, बैक ऑफ लेंथ करा रहा है. सिली टेडी उसी का सीधी 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 हर वक्त हमारे ग्रुप पे पोस्ट कर रहा है. And for him to then show up against the best lineup against a generation that's already looking to usurp him, um, fighting against people yelling fixer and chore and whatever, like I don't want to absolve him of all those blames, but narratively for a dude to show up and then to show up in this way in this match, I think it's really immense of Amir.
yeah, it's one of the all-time performances, really. Like, the just imagine, like, I remember I did this fairly big feature on him, spoke to him in some depth about it. Like, just imagine the atrophy of being like a young world-class athlete who then for 5 years or 4.5 years or whatever cannot do anything competitively. So he can like try and keep himself fit, but keep himself fit in the way that you and I keep ourselves fit. कि यार खाना ठीक से खाएंगे और चलो छत पे जाके थोड़ी सी एक्सरसाइज कर लेते हैं, वर्जिश वर्जिश कर लें, थोड़ा सा भाग लेंगे उधर. But he effectively like cannot bowl at anyone who's a professional player. He cannot bowl really in like nets, any ground that is owned by the Pakistan Cricket Board. He cannot do any of that. And so that atrophy, to kind of combat that and come back, it's actually like almost a scientific marvel that he came back and until 2017 bowled the way that he did, because he was still doing stuff until 2017. And the combination of his like big game now. I remember Mickey Arthur used to say it, and we kind of used to treat it like pretty flippantly. Ke, haan, yaar, Mickey Arthur, of course, will say but he used to say that, look, Amir is a big gun player. Like, you put him in. So if you look at Amir's best performances, Lords against England, that's as big a occasion for a Pakistani player as for many, as any other occasion is. World Cups mein performances uski, T20 World Cups mein
His
performances
big
uski.
performance in like his comeback tour is the same country where he was arrested, and he does not the job we expected of him, but still for somebody coming back and playing professional sport after being completely out of it, he has a remarkable series in that context. And then again he's back in England and he does this at a tournament and a match he probably wouldn't have played because he was injured and Roman had been sensational against England. Hassan Ali was our best bowler. We like Pakistan didn't really need Amir even.
Yeah,
You could
Junaid,
argue that
Junaid was
Pakistan
playing.
still
Junaid was
wins this
actually
without
doing
him.
pretty well at that
Yeah.
time. So he was another left arm option. So like they could have, and I remember there was some doubt about कि यार वो खेलेगा नहीं खेलेगा, but for him to come back
Yeah.
in that England series, by the way, 2016 में जो return थी इसकी, he bowled well enough in that series for Pakistan. That's how Pakistan went to number one in the Test rankings. He played a key role in that. So big game उसकी जो sense थी was amazing. The fact that he had come back, I couldn't get over the fact that somebody, and I looked at other sports. I looked at something like, it sounds big to compare, but Muhammad Ali ka jo ban hua tha after he refused to go to Vietnam, he didn't box for like 4 years. I looked at something like that. There was another case of like a cyclist who was done for doping and then did not come back for like 4 or 5 years. I kind of compared to those examples. कि
The
जब वापस आया
analogy,
था,
the analogy I had made, sorry to cut you, वो
नहीं
analogy
नहीं
I
go
had
on.
made जब इसका ban लगा था और मैंने article लिखा था, was Paolo Rossi, who's an Italian footballer who was banned in the match fixing scandal and then comes back and wins the Golden Boot for Italy in 1992,
Yes.
which is possibly the most successful version of this story, along with maybe Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, absolutely. And for him to then come back and do this, it was amazing. And I think this is probably kind of leading now to the end. And this is the discussion that we had yesterday, is how we look at that final now. And this goes to the nature of his bowling in that final, is whether that final marked the end of the first half of his greatness, of like from pre-ban, pre-fixing to that point, whether that completed one arc or whether it was the start of his actually, because so of his downturn, leading to his like kind of fading from Pakistan cricket. So after this tournament, I was looking up stats. After the Champions Trophy final, he went on a run of 15 ODIs where he took 5 wickets. There
Yeah,
was a run
yeah.
in there where he took 1 wicket in 9 ODIs, like 1 wicket, and that was the Zimbabwe number 11 in Harare. Right? I know this because I looked it up, and so you wonder like whether I really feel like it marks this middle point, amazing middle point, where after that he became not a bad bowler, but a completely different kind of bowler. One who was, like you alluded to earlier, like one who pulled his lengths back, became a bit more cautious about, like, became a bit more careful about not giving those runs away, and eventually, although he's still probably a very good and smart white ball bowler, but what he could have been when we thought 2009 mein, and then we thought कि 2017 mein, like maybe he's back. I think it kind of narrowed his scope down to what he now is, a much more pragmatic kind of bowler. And the 2019 World Cup, in which he was amazing, by the way, but he was amazing in a very different way. He was, Pakistan's leading wicket taker, among the leading wicket takers in that tournament, but he was amazing in a very different, less exhilarating, maybe even less clutch way in that tournament.
Yeah, I feel what I really understood where Amir was now was कि जो sixth PSL हुई थी, which ended over a suspected COVID outbreak caused by an unauthorized birthday party. तो उस वक्त मैं भी बबल के अंदर काम कर रहा था, working for the PCB or the PSL, and I was working with Kashu, a legend of the board, who does all the videography,
Yes,
photography, a billion other things, editing, this, that, and the other.
Kachu is a
और
giant.
काशू हैड एन आइडिया कि लीग कल सुबह तक बंद होने वाली है, बट वो मुझे नहीं बता रहा था। और कराची लाहौर का मैच हुआ था जिसमें शाहीन और आमिर दोनों ने बहुत अच्छी बॉलिंग कराई थी, एंड सो वी वुड डू दीज थिंग्स दैट वाज शॉर्ट लिव्ड कॉल्ड पीएसएल फिल्म्स, एंड वर एनएफएल फिल्म स्टाइल, हम लोग एक ड्रामेटिक काइंड ऑफ एडिटिंग के साथ कर रहे थे, एंड आई वांटेड टू हैव लाइक अ शाहीन वर्सेस आमिर episode where Shaheen ultimately ended up winning that match, and he had like he'd gotten Babar out and whatever, but Amir had picked up wickets. The crowd was yelling his name. Drama काफी था, and we never ended up to finish that video because league बंद हो गई और फिर काफी लंबे देर तक नहीं थी. But it was that when I was editing that at that night, it kind of hit me that, man, like, Shaheen is just the bowler that I thought Amir was still going to be. And, like, शाहीन की बॉलिंग को जब हम देख रहे हैं और उसकी एडिट्स डाल रहे हो, फिर आमिर की ढूंढ रहे थे, जस्ट विजुअली पुटिंग इट ऑन एन एडिटोरियल टाइमलाइन, इट जस्ट वाजंट रियली सेक्सी वाचिंग आमिर bowl. And it was like I should have known that, but it was just like, oh yeah, damn, like, we've been talking about how much Amir's changed, and gave up, but it wasn't until I saw him next to Shaheen properly focusing on it that it was just like, for me, maybe it was many years too late, but it was just like the guy who came after the ban is almost nothing like the previous bowler. And it was this match that caused, the bull to be in front of my eyes for so long, because I was just like, man, usne India ko final mein bheja hai
Yeah.
bhai. How am I underestimating him? And I think in hindsight, it's crazy that he was able to extract this one performance from what was otherwise since that career, it has not looked like this is something he can do regularly. And to do that with the whole world having that expectation on you, and all that, knowing that your teammates don't want you back in the team, and blah 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 blah, is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, absolutely, and it'll go down like in history. I guess we're kind of anointing it as such as one of the great Pakistani fast bowling spells. And I just want to end, I guess, with like one observation that I had, and I discussed this with you yesterday. When I spoke to Amir, I really got like this strong sense, and he didn't say it like outright in as many words, but I got this real strong sense from him that the bowler that he was after this, and so in the second half, very much in the second half of his career, like the guy who didn't swing the ball that much, but was still a very competent, efficient bowler who would not get hit, not get taken for runs, may not pick up those sexy wickets that we had come to see. I got the sense from Amar when I spoke to him that is the bowler who he always thought he was. And I know you think that might be like him, post hoc kind of reassessing his own career, but I feel like his logic was that वो जो 2009 और 2010 में आप मुझे याद करते हैं, वो इतने कंडीशंस में मैंने बॉलिंग कराई थी, इंग्लैंड में इतनी स्विंग हो रही थी उस साल 2010 में, इतनी स्विंग हुई ये बॉल. He didn't point it out, but he has referred to bowling alongside Mohammad Asif. If you have Asif at the other end when you're bowling, then you're immediately looking like 10 times better as a bowler because of Asif there, all these things. And I felt like his frustration in this time, and this is just before the 2019 World Cup, and he's thinking of his career afterwards. He in fact said to me in that interview that I might retire from Test cricket, although he announced it later. He said to me in that interview that he might retire from Test cricket. I think he was coming to terms with the fact that जो लोग याद करते थे जिस आमिर को, वो आमिर कभी reality थी नहीं, and he knew it. And he was frustrated that people weren't understanding that the bowler he is now, i.e., when I interviewed him, is one, not a bad bowler at all, and two, actually maybe the real Amir. And I found it fascinating. I'm not saying that I'm right on this. I'm not saying that's maybe what he was saying. I just got this sense, very strong sense that is what he was implying. And I found it absolutely fascinating in terms of self-awareness. And I guess, the stuff that he's gone through in his life, he had just lost his mother around that time as well. But like the jail sentence, I think it really changed him. And it really gave him like this new kind of self-awareness about life and about how he should live it. He, felt betrayed by a lot of people as well, the way they treated him before and after that, justifiably so. And I think he just had this newfound kind of awareness, a new way of looking at what he had been and what he was. I just found it like, yeah, just to end, I found it really fascinating in how he went about assessing his career.
I think, yeah, that's something. इस एपिसोड में हमारा इरादा तो था मगर मौका नहीं मिला करने का कि टॉकिंग अबाउट लाइक how like fixing and its human cost and the kind of what it means to criticize it versus what it means to actually have to deal with it and the complications that come with that, and particularly at the age and we haven't talked about it, but you were saying this yesterday that even though Pakistani cricket is almost entirely filled up with working class people, Amir was one of the most impoverished out of a very impoverished group in one of the most impoverished countries in the world. And that doesn't excuse things, but it definitely, there's a context to it that I think is very easily dismissed by a lot of moralizing people, which in a country like Pakistan is where similarly unethical practices are extremely common everywhere and done by the elite. It feels a bit rich to have that, but maybe we'll discuss that. We have lots of fixers on this episode, so we will discuss this on a later episode. No shortage of that in Pakistan cricket. I think we should end it over here. Usman, thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much to Nasir Hussain and to Farah, Usman's cousin, who got us the mic. Take care, everyone, and we'll be back soon.
एकदम इन्होंने वक्त बदल दिया, जज्बात बदल दिए, जिंदगी बदल दी। मारो मुझे, मारो मारो मुझे, मारो। Asking for it. सारे मिलके हमको पागल बना रहे हैं, मादर के बच्चे।